Good day, colleagues. Welcome to this sharing session. This is Abraham White from Emergency Medicine Unit. I joined Hong Kong UMed in 2017 and received the fellowship in 2018. My teaching duties include emergency medicine clerkships, a common core course on health policy, and MBBS medical law and ethics teaching. It's my great pleasure to share mine after Brian, who is well known to be an enthusiastic medical educator. In fact, his presentation has covered most of the essential points I can think of. Therefore, instead of making a completely different presentation, I would build on Brian's personal experience to elaborate how new teachers in Hong Kong UMed can develop your own teaching portfolio. So in this session, I would like to introduce how to recognize the evidence requirements for fellowship application, summarize the principles of preparation for the fellowship. Lastly, I would like you to be able to synthesize the statement for application. This is the evidence requirement from the UK. As Brian has mentioned this, I would like to skip this graph. When you start your preparation, there are a few points I suggest you to bear in mind. First of all, this is an application essay to claim for your fellowship. Therefore, you have the responsibility to present your experience in a way to facilitate the readers, who are your assessors in UK, to understand and then accept your evidence so that they would grant you the fellowship. 2. This is a personal statement. Contrary to scientific writing, this is a very personal statement. You should use more I or we rather than using passive voice, which conceals your role in the excellence of teaching. Third, we know that in order to stick to global best practice and to excel, we may integrate new ideas from literature to enhance our teaching. Next point, UK PSF is set as the competence standard for the entire program. Please mark your initiative with appropriate competence code. It is more than marking a code with your teaching behavior. It also shows that you understand the meaning of UK PSF and can apply them correctly. This is the UK PSF framework that has been shown in Brian's presentation. I'm not going into detail in this presentation now. Try to demonstrate your reflection as much as possible. We are good at telling the story, but without reflection, it is hard to believe one can learn from the teaching experience. A good teacher should commit to the teaching. It is important to show that you are an enthusiastic teacher. You really like teaching students and wish to teach better and better. Your argument should be evidence-based. It does not necessarily as objective as a numerical measurement. Your examples tell a lot. These examples should support your arguments. Quality. Well, quality is important. Most of us are experienced in marking student scripts. I believe you definitely have different feeling when you read a quality submission from your students. While the essay should inform the assessors your current competence, it is better to support your points with most recent examples. Lastly, as each of areas allow not more than 600 words, in fact, I trimmed mine to around 480 to 520 words so that it would be not too wordy. You have to articulate your point wisely so that you can illustrate your will. Your application should be based on more than just a description of what you do. Moving beyond description to provide a rationale for the approaches that you take to teaching and supporting learning, followed by some evaluative comments as to its effectiveness, is a key element in taking a critical approach to your teaching duties. Say, for example, here you can see a 3-step model has proven useful in other successful applications as a broad guiding approach when providing an account of your practice. Describe what do you do in that area of practice. Analyze why do you do it this way. Evaluate is that you do effective and how do you know this. Try to use this approach wherever you include an example of your practice. Don't just say what you do, but ask yourself why you do this and whether you know it is effective. Evaluation does not have to be strictly followed at all times. Settled score is by no means the whole story. A1. Design and plan learning activities and programs of study. In what ways are you involved in designing and planning your teaching? You don't have to be a program or course coordinator to be involved with design and planning. Even a single lecture, tutorial, practical class, or other teaching situation has to be designed and planned. A frequent question asked under this heading is around the degree of involvement required in the design and planning process. I believe many teachers among the audience are given a topic and a brief for their teaching and are expected to deliver it. This might appear to leave little room for one's own interpretation and teaching approach to be used. Similarly, there has been well-defined learning outcomes in professional programs. However, exactly how the session is delivered is still controlled by you. In this application, doing something because you are told to isn't going to be sufficient. Your rationale is important. In terms of planning and design, typically the course of program learning outcomes are the starting point for what we teach, followed by a model known as constructive alignment. That means the assessment, the teaching, the evaluation, they are aligned. Your design is shaped by feedback from a previous student cohort or by the need to demonstrate progression between one part of a course to program and another. Being able to show a systematic approach to your design and planning is recommended here. Your design and planning processes will rarely show up through being commented upon by students via course evaluation. Be prepared to look for evidence that is not collected formally. Ask your colleagues, ask the students directly, find out if, as a result of changes you have made, other parts of the course or program are working more effectively. A2. Teach and support learning. In this session, you describe the teaching activities with which you are involved. You need to describe briefly what you teach in order to provide some context for your account. But don't get bogged down in the complexities of the topic, number of hours taught, etc. This application is about the process of teaching and your own critical self-examination of the techniques that you use to help your students to learn. It is not about simply describing what you teach or how many hours it takes. What is your rationale for teaching in the way that you do? At first, many of us teach either in a manner that emulates those lecturers and other staff who taught us in a manner that we thought of as particularly effective, or in a manner that tries to avoid aspects of teaching that we particularly dislike. It is often the case that we have no well-developed ideas about teaching in its broader sense when we start teaching. Our practice evolves. While formal feedback, while settled, is more likely to address lectures than, for example, tutorials looking for informal feedback whilst teaching in all situations, from clauses informally or via peer observation more formally, can all be used ways to validate your approaches. Similarly, how do your students react to your teaching? Are they engaged? How do you know this? Are they awake? Are they, say for example, asking questions? In turn, are these questions good in the sense that they are non-trivial, perhaps probing points which indicate to you that they are thinking and engaging actively with the ideas that you are presenting? A3. Assess and give feedback to learners. Assessment comes in many forms. First of all, you need to ask yourself, do I provide formal or informal assessment or both? Do I use formative and summative assessment or both? In what ways do I provide feedback to students? Why do you use the assessment methods that you do? Are they the most effective way to test the intended learning outcomes from the course? Did you provide opportunities for students to receive feedback before it is too late to do anything with it to improve their performance? For example, a mid-session test or essay is an ideal way to provide your students with useful feedback, not only on their current performance, but also to highlight areas where they can improve. And perhaps more importantly, have time to improve prior to the final summative assessment. Are the assessments that you use really testing the things that you want your students to know that they have learned? Or are they testing how well the students can write about these things? Or indeed, how much they can write? Whilst it is easy to write off such questions, simply by asking them can uncover assumptions and hopes about what we think we are assessing. Put another way, to what degree do the assessments that we use encourage students' learning to last beyond the end of the course? Similarly, it is an easy assumption to make that effective feedback provided by staff is identified and commented upon favorably by students via formal feedback processes. However, do you really know what your students do with their feedback. How might you find out? A4. Develop effective learning environments and approaches to student support and guidance. With the increasing student population, our teaching is often constrained by limited physical teaching floor space. However, a learning environment is more than that. Over the past 9 months, we all experienced an accelerated transformation to teach on virtual environments such as Moodle, Panopto, and Zoom. You may want to consider the intellectual environments that you create with your learners. Are they simply passive recipients of knowledge that you transmit to them? Or do you interact with them? Or support them to interact with ideas, materials, artifacts, or other facets of discipline? Do you encourage them to generate questions, perhaps along the lines of how we as researchers might? Note that active learning doesn't have to involve students running around, changing seats, being on a field course. They can be engaged in an active manner by providing them with the space and time to think about things that you are teaching. Make sure that you really do this through. Regarding student support and guidance, first of all, establish whether you are involved in support and guidance from an academic perspective, in a pastoral role, or in both. Next, you may ask yourself, in what ways are you involved in this? It could be formally, as a personal tutor, for example, or informally through discussions with students around their coursework or course selection. The last area is A5, that is a CPD. You are seeking to demonstrate and provide evidence that you have a professional approach to your own development as an educator. Throughout this session, always make an explicit link between any CPD that you highlight and the way in which you have used this to enhance your teaching. We learn through walking with others, attending or presenting at specialist events, discussion with the colleagues, reading about new ideas, being part of a professional network, amongst many others. These situations are as likely to be focused on your research as on your teaching. The point here is to make sure that there you can make a clear and obvious link between some of all of your CPD activities and your teaching. You are not expected to be an educational researcher in order to complete this session, but you are expected to be aware of and be able to demonstrate your use of scholarship in the field of learning and teaching. For example, perhaps you attended the Frontier Conference organized by BIMSI, and as a result, were able to see new material that you pick up for the conference in your teaching as a result. Alternatively, a discussion with a colleague from another discipline resulted in you trying out a new teaching approach. Similarly, undertaking the role of an external examiner is an important and valued actively in terms of learning and teaching. But what impact does it have on your own teaching? What have you learned from the process, and how has it made your teaching better or benefited your students as a result? In a different way, you might be engaged directly in your research into your teaching. and have published in one of the many pedagogic journals that many accompany disciplines. COPD differs from person to person and can rarely be standardized at this level. However, when thinking about CPD in the context of this application, ensure that whatever you choose to public can be linked directly to your account in improving your students' learning. The most important the point is link your CPD with your teaching and learner support network. Indicate what you have learned as a result of understanding CPD. In what ways has undertaking this CPD influenced your teaching? I think you may consider in what ways has undertaking this CPD influenced your teaching? You ask to provide a scientific A minus. So in summary, you need 5 pieces of 600-word narratives, letters from 2 referees, 1 copy of your CV, and evaluation performer before submission. The narrative should demonstrate your reflection of your engagement to current practice and align with UK BSF. Lastly, you are advised to involve, describe, analyze, and evaluate in each of narrative, supplemented with your own examples. Thank you, and may I wish you a happy and peaceful Christmas holiday for you. Bye bye.